say just a few words to welcome to Joy. Thank you, Joy, to come here. We are proud to receive you for this this opening of the new program. We are happy to have Microsoft and Orange as partner for this cybersecurity program, and I would like to thank the member of the team of Microsoft who are very involved in that the creation of this new program. Daniel Pasquier, Benjamin Bouquenog, sorry for the word, Albertino Mathias, Alexandre Lafague, Karine Sanguinet, François Tachoir, Pierre Audonnet, Mohamed Antri, et Arnaud Gilnet. Thank you very much. And now I think the show must start.
Thank you very much, Christophe, and welcome everybody to this presentation on identity by Joy Chik, Vice President of Microsoft, Corporate Vice President of Microsoft. We are very pleased to have Joy here at the ECE. This actually conference is to be held in the context of this new partnership between ECE and Microsoft, and this letter actually is a part of a bigger tripartite partnership between Orange Cyber Defense, Microsoft, and ECE that led to the creation of the new major specialization, Defensive Cybersecurity. So welcome again. So myself, I'm Salim Ali. Most of you knows me. Actually, I'm head of Information Systems, Cybersecurity, and Big Data Department. My students have access to two major specializations in last year. The first one is dedicated for data, big data and analytics, and the second one is defensive cybersecurity, actually the specialization that we created in partnership with Microsoft and Orange Cyber Defense. So I'm going to present you actually the creation, the history of this very new major. Actually, everything started a few months ago, and actually it was a meeting in the office of Michel Vanderberg, the president of Orange Cyber Defense, with Christophe, Arnaud, and Michel. Actually, we did a meeting, and it was stated out that companies like corporates like Orange and other corporates in France are having too much difficulties on finding skills. There is a huge penury on security skills. There is a real shortage actually on especially Microsoft security, Active Directory security, and Azure Active Directory security. So the idea, and because actually we had an objective at the ECE to have a new major on security in the coming 2 or 3 years, and so it was actually discussed to create this new major specialization. It was a very good idea because in France traditionally we don't teach too much Windows security. So we are accustomed to have actually security on networks and on Linux operating system. So in all cases, teaching Windows security is really let's say, a difficult task without the presence of experts from Microsoft. This was a great opportunity. In January this year, so a few months ago, we decided to create this new specialization with Microsoft and Orange, and we started work. And actually, we set the quality bar, the objective is very high. We wanted actually to have something with really special on security on Windows and Active Directory, identity. We wanted something that is dedicated to identity. So we started working, and also we wanted to have experts. We wanted to transfer the expertise of Microsoft experts to students. At the same time, we wanted also to have the label of the ANSSI. ANSSI, as you know, is the French national agency about information system security. So, so these are the objectives. We started working, and now, starting from this academic year, from 2 months ago, we created. The major was open, and now we have 41 students for the first group that will be graduated next year in a few months. We are very happy, we are very pleased. Personally, I'm really very actually satisfied, and really it's a huge satisfaction to have this project successing at the end. One of the first objective was realized in August. We got the label SecNum, which is a label actually that is delivered by the ANSI, so the French National Agency on Information Security. This label certifies that what we propose is compliant to the requirements of the French state in terms of cybersecurity. This is the first objective was realized. The second objective was to bring actually the expertise of Microsoft, actually experts, and at the same time to bring innovation actually in the proposed courses. So what we have done with Microsoft, we created two courses, two blended courses. If you are not familiar with the term, so blended courses are courses or blended learning is the learning in which we combine traditional face-to-face learning with online learning. So we created two online courses with the experts of Microsoft. And here is also the opportunity to thank the team of the digital team of the group in SEC, Leila, Justin, and Jean-Baptiste, that helped a lot actually in creating the online courses. And so we have also face-to-face learning, and in which actually experts from Microsoft are there in the school every Thursday to accompany students in their projects and their labs. So this is one of the objectives, and of course in this kind of learning, actually I'm very motivated, I'm very excited to have this kind of learning because it copes well with this new generation of students that are accustomed to use or addicted or even to use social media, YouTube. So self-paced is one of the learning is one of the most important characteristics actually in this kind of learning. So this is done actually. This is ensured by having online courses, and of course it leverages also the traditional face-to-face learning because we have the experts of Microsoft every week. Now for actually fulfilling the first objective is to having the label of the NC, we should actually also propose something that is multidisciplinary, because there are a lot of requirements that actually, in order to get the label, we have to propose a lot of themes, and these are some of the themes that we propose in this measure. So we have identity and access management in Microsoft environment. This is a blended course, online and traditional face-to-face. The same thing on Windows security. We have courses on cybersecurity policies, etc. Orange also is present in the measure by proposing actually projects, internships, and also conferences. We have also a third partner, TALS, actually, that is giving a course on incident response, forensics, and reverse engineering. And of course, other themes like we have experts, external experts also that ensure other themes like penetration testing, risk analysis, and etc. All this could not be possible without actually the huge contribution of our partners, especially experts from Microsoft. Here you have the dream team that is led by Arnaud Julier, who was actually one of the huge assets in the project. He was a really huge asset. He was a real pillar in the project. I can assure you that without him, nothing would happen. And of course, all the other team, I really appreciate working with all of them. They are really very motivated. They work with a lot of engagement, commitment, and love. Love to share, love to educate, love to form students. This is something that I'm telling you from really my heart. Okay, so thank you very team. Thank you very much, the dream team of Microsoft. Without you, this could not be possible. Thank you very much. So we have Alexandre, that's here. Albertino, Benjamin, Daniel, Karen, Francois, Pierre, who came from Canada, especially actually to make the videos on Active Directory, and Mohammed. Thank you very much. Now it's time actually to leave the micro to Chik, as I said, Corporate Vice President for the Identity Division in Microsoft. We are very pleased to have you, Joy, here. Thank you very much. So, I just profit before starting the talk to call our experts from Microsoft to actually step into the stage. Alexandre, Francois, Arnaud. So students of the ECE prepared for you some gifts that were made actually in the Fab Lab. Come please. Mathieu aussi? Of course. So this is actually some gifts prepared actually in the Fab Lab. Yeah.
Oh wow, that is cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Matthew, you wonder how we plug it? Oh, it's already plugged in. Okay. I guess I can. Oh yeah, thank you. Wow, thank you so much for inviting me. First of all, just everybody relax. First of all, I usually don't dress up that much. I usually dress more like all of you. And before I actually come, to Paris for the week, because we're meeting a lot of customers, as well as we had an MS Experience conference. And my team told me, French really dress up. So, like, you need to not wear jeans, and, it's like, that's okay, I'll bring some clothes. So we don't usually dress up at Microsoft on a daily basis. The other thing I was going to tell you is I thought I had all my slides finished, but then like at the last minute, I was working on extra slides right before like the last customer meeting, and as you can see, I was typing. So something doesn't change. You probably always do your homework at the last second, and something just never changes. And don't worry, you can still get a job. Okay, so. This is the slide I added, so if there's spelling mistake or grammar mistake, just just knowing that that's the slide I added. So I thought it might be just break the ice a little bit. Let me just first start it with about who I am and what's my journey. Hopefully that kind of teaches you, like, all of you can, have a great career. You are in a great set of field in cybersecurity. That is for anything, as everything going through digital transformation. Cloud is the biggest opportunity, and cybersecurity is every single companies and the customers the top of the mind. So it is a great time. So I know I don't know how many of you were not born in 1996. Probably a lot of you. So I may not, I'm much older than I look. So I interned at Microsoft in 1996, and actually, at the time, I only had a couple of classes. I didn't have the opportunity, like all of you have, a program such like, ECE, which is really getting you immersed into the real world, like, cybersecurity classes, which set you up, really well in terms of getting internship and experience. So please take advantage of that. For me, when I took the Microsoft internship, I finished my freshman year, so first year university. I didn't have any work experience, not much programming experience. So my favorite memory to share with you was, back then we also don't have LinkedIn. So, we used traditional resume on paper. And I remember my resume to Microsoft at the time was listed every single computer science class I've taken in my first semester, which is about like 5 or 6. And I think I even included math and physics and etc. And I put the biggest fonts that's possible. And my resume was still half page. And to this date, I'm still wondering whoever decided to interview me. I was eternal grateful because I was able to get an internship at Microsoft in 1996. After I graduated, I joined Microsoft as a full-time employee, working on Windows, specifically working on, how many of you know remote desktop? Okay, a few of you. Yes, okay, sounds like I have a few fans. So I joined Microsoft working on remote desktop team, part of the Windows organization. At the time, now we're talking about billions of users. At the time, we're proud to talk about millions of users. that using Windows and operating system was something I'm passionate. I'm still passionate about. So I, started. I graduated from this school called Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York. It's an engineering school, graduate computer science, and I started Microsoft in 1998 as a software engineer. And I really stayed in engineering. So, so those of you who think about it, hey, if you later on want to take on leadership position or not, you can still stay very technical, being an engineer, and you can have a very successful career, So I started as an engineer, and then I become sort of, a technical lead, and it becomes managers and directors. I worked on 3 major products throughout my career. One is a remote desktop, which we kind of started when I was one of the developer out of maybe 10 people. We grew both the product and the team to over 150, as well as the product to over $1 billion business. And then I worked on Microsoft Intune, which is a part of the security product as enterprise mobility and the security about 5.5 years ago. And that's when we started also transition more to cloud services, as well as not just Windows platform, but cross-platform across the iOS, Android, and Mac, including Windows. And then about 2 years ago is when I took on the leadership role for running the identity division. One of the things there's a kind of similarity of the spaces I'm in. Enterprise spaces, so more on the commercial side than the consumer. I like both products have that horizontal like kind of platform scenarios. So security is very horizontal, identity is very horizontal. Remote desktop is actually very horizontal. That enables a lot of scenarios. I also like to work on areas that has just a lot broader customer impact, like millions and now billions of users that use the product impact. And I'll show some about the data about what identity and what Microsoft we do. And I became one of the distinguished engineer at Microsoft in 2014. I think I'm the second female distinguished engineer in the history of Microsoft. I know it took a while, we have more now, so for those of you girls, you can get there. We need more women and more diversity in tech. That's also one of my passionate area. And I became corporate vice president in 2016. That's kind of also, at that point, I also took on the identity, leading the identity division. So that's kind of my journey. Outside Microsoft, I'm on the board of trustee for Anita B, which is the organization powers Grace Hopper Conference, which is the largest women in tech conference. More presence in the US, but also we're trying to reach more globally. And I just last month joined the Sierra Wireless. It's actually a Canadian, Vancouver-based IoT company. They actually have an office in Paris as well as Toulouse. And I just learned Christopher has actually worked at Sierra, which is such a small world. So I just joined the board of directors with that company. And a part of what I want to do is not just leverage my industry expertise, but also see how to then using that to impact more globally. And IoT is one of, frankly, a lot of IoT relates to identity and cybersecurity, because that would be the next set of frontier for hackers to attack. So something I think if you haven't think about it, you should think about that in terms of the attack vectors. So that's kind of about my work and career history. Outside of work, me and my fiance together, we don't have kids, but we do have 2 little dogs, which is painful, frankly. And the only difference is I don't typically go to jail. If they're too loud, I leave them in the garage or not. Have a little bit more room. And outside of work, I do like hiking and yoga. So that's something I actually do get up very early in the morning, try to get my exercise done. So those are my passionate areas. So, okay, enough about me. So, you know, I have some slides. Frankly, I'm more interested into, you know, kind of getting more Q&A. So I hope I don't spend too much time on all the slides. One of the things, you know, I talk about sort of my job and all that. One of the things that's really important to me right now is, you know, in the cybersecurity space, it's exciting because you're really in the sort of the front line of a lot of things that's happening, good and bad, right? If you help a customer, or you help, like in your case, maybe even family members, your friends, if they have their identities or account compromised, if you help them to figure out what happened, how many have you done it? Yeah, okay, a few of you, right? I think it's very rewarding, but at the same time, you know, as you learn through the classes and all that, it can be also scary. Sometimes, frankly, you know, on the job, it can be very high pressure. As you can see, just the amount of attack that's happening, it is really increasing. You know, magnitude of increasing, because it's no longer just about sort of hackers who want to do that to get some ransom money or as to claim fame. Literally, nation states using that as a way to impact democracy. And you know, we know from like WannaCry or NotPetya, people, I mean, you all know about, right, these attacks? Yeah. And it, you know, human lives were at stake at, you know, when hospitals, when, you know, doctors cannot log in. So what I think is, you know, our job is more than just a job. You know, you work for a company, build your career. But to me, it is also a lot of it's our own moral responsibility, because to me, we're not just protecting business, but we're also protecting democracy and human lives. And it's so bigger than that. So if I use some analogy, it's a little bit like, you know, you can think of you're either a detective, you know, you're trying to do, you know, chasing down a crime, or another analogy is maybe you're firefighters. And the reason I'm thinking about that is because sometimes you just don't know what happened. Like, I don't know what's happening tomorrow because it can be unpredictable. But the part that you kind of want to know is, one is you're in a really exciting space. But sometimes maybe also for me is the pressure might be high, but how do you balance that, you know, and once you get to your internship or even classes, it's hard. How do you balance the pressure versus, you know, versus outside of that pressure is how do you also enjoy what you are learning? And when you start working, how do you enjoy in terms of the work versus outside the work? The good news is trying to have a balance, what you're passionate about at work, as well as what you're passionate outside of the work, is to keep you balanced. And I highly recommend you to keep that in mind. And, you know, you might now not thinking about it as much, but you'll thank me for it after you start your career. And the way we really think about security is really 3 dimension. You know, I work on you know, identity from the technology side, so I'm more focusing on that. But frankly, all the services that we run for all the, you know, millions of customers, there's a lot of security operation, because, you know, how do we deploy all the, you know, updates to the services? How do we make sure our customer configured correctly? If they were in a compromised situation, how can we help them to forensic, to track what accounts has been compromised? How do you track what bad actors, whether they are in the system or not? Because sometimes it's not just about getting the bad the actors out of the system. Sometimes you actually have to do a little bit covert in terms of investigation while you are under being attacked or compromised. Because if you just kick them out, they might have a lot of, get into enough entry ways into your system that if you don't know how to identify all that, they might delete all the forensics, so that, which would impact how you actually detect what's all, or trying to trace back what all happened. So I know some of the classes looks like you'll be learning, if not you're already learning, we'll teach you more of that. And so the operation side, besides just the technology, how you learn, is also very important. And the other thing we talk about partnership is more so than not, even though, in the tech industry, Microsoft is like any other companies, we have competitors. But in the cybersecurity space, we actually partner across the industry. Like we share signals with like Google's, Facebook, you name it. An example would be, if a Microsoft account, like identity, we actually don't just do Active Directory or Azure AD. I also run all of the consumer identities. I think the next slide will show. So like Xbox, Minecraft, and all the consumer space. So if you have a Gmail email address in Microsoft account, more likely that Gmail account also have a Google account, right? So if we know the Gmail email address is being compromised, we actually share that with Google and vice versa, and Facebook, etc. The reason at the end of the day is we really want to protect the end users, and that's important. This is not a space you're trying to withhold information. But the things we differentiate is how can we use the leverage of all the cloud services we run to be smarter so that we can protect our users and the customer better than our competitors, and that's where we differentiate, right? But once in terms of what compromised, we do share a lot of signals and partnerships so that we can all be better to protect. So these are just look at the scale in terms of the volume, And by the way, these 17 million organizations, all of them using Active Directory. They are moving to Azure Active Directory. So all the stuff you are learning right now, like I know some of the curriculum, you're doing the Active Directories, different classes. These are all the basics, right? Speaking of which, please don't ask me detailed questions because I can tell more about the cloud side. But it's important to know Active Directory is your foundation, that what all these enterprise customers is running today. In Azure Active Directory, we have over 17 million organizations, not just 17 million users. We have over 1 billion commercial, which is Azure Active Directory identities we run in our cloud services. And just think about that. Right, 1% of that, if that gets impacted, it's huge, So it is the scale that's it's exciting, but it's also, that means it's a lot of responsibilities. We have on the consumer side, we have 9 billion across, some of the logos. Let's talk about Microsoft Tech as much as these are the ones that you're familiar with, just the whole entire spectrum. It's a fun part of the job to know like pretty much the entire world that's running on our platforms. But I can tell you, sometimes it is super stressful, right? So that's why I think, as you're in this space, it's important to keep in mind in terms of why you're in this space, and when situation is stressful, how to balance that. And having that, curiosity and passion, but keep calm at the same time is important. I'm going to quickly go through, I gave the talk yesterday at MS Experience, the security talk track, and some of the talk is similar to the Microsoft Ignite event you can find online. Basically, right, like you heard the word, digital transformation, that this is happening to all the companies around the world. And the reason is because everything is going online, and people are doing more shopping online, people are doing more collaboration, so it's inevitable, right? So it's not even just say, well, can I just not go in there? I mean, if any company want to survive and compete, that's just happening. And, Active Directory is there. But the old way in terms of think about security is really that VPNs, physical network that draws a circle, and that is, your environment. These are still important to learn and how it works, because that is the infrastructure majority, if not all of these company has. and that is their starting point. And how do you then move to the world that is all enabled, connected with the cloud? This is what the world is, turning into, which is you still have your Active Directory or your on-premise. We call it on-premise, which is basically company's corporate environment. But they want to use whether it's Office 365 or whether it's Salesforce, ServiceNow, Google Apps, even or Box, Slack, a lot of devices, right? We have iOS, your Android, Mac, Windows. It is basically the good news is people are getting productive because they can get connected. But the challenge is that there's no circle you can draw anymore from the security perspective. So that's changing. And this is the number. I mean, it's not Microsoft number. This is the number. What's the impact? 1 million per minute that business gets impacted due to cybersecurity crime. The reason is because when all the businesses are moving to the cloud, the criminals, the hackers, they also move to the cloud to leverage the cloud to create that massive attack pattern. And since a lot of them actually have the certain nation states that you hear on the news, so they get involved and they have both the money and all that the leverage in terms of how to take advantage of the cloud to magnify all that attack pattern. This shows you what we see. This is only the number, what we see at Microsoft in terms of all the attacks that's happening every single day. It's massive. I'm not going to read all the numbers. I mean, they are big numbers, right? I mean, they are huge. And the thing is then sometimes, we get asked a lot less. It's like, well, should we just, am I not going to move to the cloud? The reality is, even if you don't move to the cloud, the attackers are attacking all the on-premise or the corporate network anyway, and they have more tools to do that. WannaCry and NotPetya is a great example showing it doesn't matter whether you choose to move to the cloud or not. The attack happening every single day as we speak, every minute. And so how do we deal with that, right? It's really that connected intelligence, because all the numbers we show, why we see all the numbers, because we are doing all these billions of transactions of authentication in the identity space. Emails, we process billions of spam emails every single month. And at Bing, Microsoft, we also see all of websites in the billions. It gives us all the data and the signals. And using machine learning, the cloud is able to help us to see, because what happens is using password spray as an example. If the password spray just happening in a single company, the attackers might actually attack in a very methodical way and slow to stay under the radar. So it's really hard for you to tell whether it's a hacker or just some users, right? But if we see similar patterns happening across, I talk about 17 million organizations is doing that at a global level, then we can see more patterns happening. And that allows us to recognize is an attack undergoing, and then we can use more tools and mechanisms to protect. And some of the classes you're going to learn is to learn how to detect and what are the things you need to do when you know an attack that's happening. Oh, the other thing is one is to understand the attack happens. More importantly is how can we automatically make sure we can actually mitigate, because it's one thing to detect. Another thing is how do you mitigate, and how do you mitigate in an automatic way. And I kind of touched on this. We call it Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph, but it's really about all these 200 plus global cloud services that we run that allows us to get all the signals. And the signals, the data is where allows us to do these, recognizing attack patterns on a daily, basis to help protect our customers, both enterprise as well consumer. So it's always good to tell you some stories in terms of these are real world stories. The first one is about phishing attack. One of your neighboring country, that happened probably past a year and a half or so. The hackers, they literally just did a, kind of methodically, systematically did a brute force of guessing passwords, and then they compromised a certain number of accounts, and then they enter those accounts, and then to do a phishing email to send to the other users. Because if you get an email from your friends, you're more likely to click on the link or you just trust it. And then so they then kind of penetrate more, compromise more accounts in the system. That the government actually didn't even actually recognize it, but they were using, Active Directory connected to Azure Active Directory for Office 365. So we're able to actually get enough of the signals because this attack doesn't happen for that particular government organization, it happens somewhere else as well. So we're able to attack the pattern. And then we're starting to notice there's a really abnormal behavior. Not only that, it allowed us to trace back to what accounts being compromised. And then we're able to actually trace all the way back to the actual bad actor, and it turns out to be another nation state. We're able to, recover all the accounts, but it really shows if you leave the, government, agent, in this case alone, it would have probably take them months, if not longer, to, even if, right, to recognize the attack. And they might just have been compromised a lot more their sensitive information. Maybe there a lot more damage could happen. We often to say, raise your hand to our customer who gets compromised. Or we say, if you don't raise your hand, you may not even know you're actually getting compromised. It doesn't mean you didn't get compromised, you just didn't know, or you don't want to admit it, right? One or the other. NotPetya. So I think you all know NotPetya, right? What happened? So in this case, this is happened at a worldwide scale. So you all know what's the damage that has done, right? And in most cases, unfortunately, because they really just take the machine over control, so all our customers cannot access to any of the data because they can't log in because they compromised the Active Directory actually. Many companies in the case, because the machines were not patched, but the cloud was not affected because we continuously update and patch in real time. And what happened in this case is one large enterprise, also global shipping company, they were compromised. They were actually on the news. The good news is they were already on the journey moving to the cloud. So what enabled them is we were able to get the data from the cloud to help use that as a starting point, starting to then reconstruct their on-premise Active Directory. It still took days and a couple of weeks, but at least compared to the ones who didn't have any of the cloud asset, allowed them to be able to recover much faster. And the customer get it, so afterwards they just completely, they were a lot very incented to move to the cloud. So the thing is to take away, especially all of you are majoring in cybersecurity, is really think about the attack vectors. That is no longer just about cloud only or on-premise only. It's global, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. But the cloud is really giving you the tool and the data and the power, so that help you as future security expert to do that forensic, to do that detection, but also helping you having the career to helping your customers so that you can educating them, helping them protect themselves better, right? And the last but not least is really just illustrating VPNs. Is just an old way to think about how to do security, and it's easily compromised if you make a simple mistake, and you're in game over. I'm going to quickly go through because actually it's very aligned with your curriculum, which I'm pretty impressed and excited. Is once you get all your sort of Active Directory basics nailed, then I know you have curriculum talk about, to learn about Azure Active Directory. So the benefit is how do you connecting the world today to the world of cloud. And then the first thing is all to bring the identities into the cloud. And one of the things to do is we have some capability allows you to sync your account and the password hash so that all the authentication happens in the cloud instead of on-premise. After you do the identities, the next step is connecting the apps to the cloud. And the one thing to kind of notice, I know it's on your curriculum, is Azure Active Directory is not just supporting the Microsoft services or the Microsoft platform. We are cross-platform Microsoft services or the on-prem, the apps that connected to Active Directory. So all the things you learn are still very relevant as a starting point, as well as all the we call third party, but other cloud services. So it's really about the entire end-to-end what you are learning. And then to do that, we have some capabilities to allow you to connect your on-premise to Azure Active Directory. I'm sure you'll learn more about that. That's kind of just give you some preview. The other thing that's important is, I don't know if on the curriculum, do you cover open standards? Yeah? Okay. So open standards are really important because the ecosystem is not just about, even though I work at Microsoft, but I know all of you, myself, we're using a lot of apps and services that's outside of Microsoft. So it is important to support open standards so that Azure Active Directory can support all the different scenarios to help our users to be secure, but also helping you to to be productive. I know all of you are identity access management. We're all the geeks. Let me put it that way, because nobody wants to sign in. One thing you have to ground it is nobody wants to sign in for the sake of signing, right? You sign in because you want to use the stuff behind it, whether play a game or Facebook or trying to use Office 365 to write a report or not. So, but the problem is how do you get there safely? That is the identity, the hard part, identity access management. But the better you can do it in a way that users does not create friction, it helps them to be productive. But frankly, that helps them to be secure, right? How many of you are using at least a similar passwords for more than one account? Don't tell me you don't do that, right? I raise my hand too, literally, because there's so many freaking accounts we have to create for all the stuff we're using, right? And guess what? You are the cybersecurity students here. What do you think what happens to your mom or your grandparents or your friends who's not in the space, right? How easy, and once one set of credential is hacked, right? That means the rest you'll be more likely hacked. And so it is super important to know how can we create an ecosystem such that no matter whether it's Microsoft service or non-Microsoft service or custom apps can have that experience that doesn't let you to create different credentials, or I'll talk about it even better, don't use password, but at least use we call it multi-factor authentication that you probably hear about. So that leads to MFA. Password is not secure, but today pretty much all services is using username and the passwords. So how do you, how many of you do turn on MFA with your own account? Multi-factor authentication, second factor. Okay. Yeah, all of you should. That part, I'm not going to tell you should all use a unique password. I know it's a turn on MFA. For at least the services you have your own personal information. Otherwise, we are not set good example. The reason is you really should, traditionally we think about, okay, how do you protect like a Microsoft corporate network? We actually now really taking the approach is we assume even Microsoft corporate network will be breached. And then the reason why it's not just about can we put more like, firewall or VPN or that, the reason is only take one user inside the network to click on the phishing email. The game is over if you only use passwords, right? That's it. And I can tell you, before I even come here, I think it was the airport in London. I was about to, fly to Paris, and I got an email. Alaska Airline is one of the U.S. Airline that I use a lot, and I flew enough this year that I was like in their top tier mileage plan. And they sent me an email. They said, hey, because you are a premier customer, we offer you 4 tickets to Nutcracker for the Christmas, ballet show. I'm like, that is awesome. And I was busy and all that. I literally clicked on the link. The story wasn't that bad. I don't think I get compromised. But my point here is sometimes maybe not because, you are ignorant or you are novice. You're just busy, right? When you're busy, you're more likely to say, oh, I want to process this or I want to take advantage of that. It takes just one person. And then you can permeate into the rest of the network. So you really just should assume the network will be compromised. And we call it zero trust. And then what do you do in that world, right? And the good news is all the stuff you learn about Azure Active Directory that you will, based on Active Directory, is basically the toolkit. In a zero trust network environment, you have users come from anywhere. You have applications from, SaaS app, cloud app, or on-premise. And you have devices of any kind. The question is, how do you use all these different factors to determine if a access is secure or not? An example is, if I'm here, I typically don't fly to Paris, then that might trigger me to say, well, let me verify Joy is really Joy versus somebody stolen my password to think, pretend to be Joy to log in from Paris, right? That's just a simple example to say, now I really want Joy to verify as a second factor authentication, like either my phone or like my fingerprint, etc. And one of the things is, we call condition. That's what we call condition. The condition is like whether it's users or devices or network or application. And then you kind of, the challenge here is, well, if I always, when you call it multi-factor authentication, if every single time when you log into something, you prompt you, like your phone notification, what happens? You always accept, right? Because you just get used to it. So I guess the art of here is really how do you do MFA when it's only really needed? Like how the system can automate so that it only prompts when we think it's risky. It doesn't mean you're compromised. It just means it's risky. But in most of the time when we know that your behavior is normal, not get in the way. So don't prompt you. And so we have a lot of, the sort of both based on the signal, machine learning, and the things to allow us to determine that. And once you determine that, you can do different decision making. You can do as stringent as block the access, or you require a second factor authentication. So a lot of things, if you think about as you study, is really think about what is the next frontier from the attack perspective. The attackers are going to get more sophisticated. So it's never be mission accomplished, right? It is really who's chasing what. And so you always assume the attackers are getting smarter and smarter. So how can we leverage all the smarts, both the human smarts as well as machine smarts, and the data to really generate new algorithms to get smarter about it. So user can still be super happy, productive, but then the system can help to detect that. The other thing is you'll never get to a point that there's no attack. You'll never get to a point that there's no compromise. So one is to prevent it. The other is how do you detect it quickly when it is getting compromised? And how do you actually make sure when it's compromised that you can actually remediate, mitigate quickly? So it's really about the amount of damage, how long is the damage, and then can you and then forensically track what has been compromised. So it's always assume breach is the mindset all of you should have. Okay, and this is just daunting stats. 81% of the attack is because of bad password. So really take advantage of MFA. MFA really reduces attack by this number. Not joking. So for one thing, if you do is all of you should turn on MFA for the services you use that allows that. Like it's not just highly recommended. Just go do it. Okay, so MFA is better than not MFA, but really what we really want to get to the world is no password, right? Any of you have used services without password? No? Yeah? A little bit? And this is what we are working on, which is basically how can we, for example, I don't have my phone, pretend this is my phone. The phone is, is the things I have, and my fingerprint something is identify who I am. This is a form of multi-factor that allows me to uniquely identify me. And you can think of other factors. I may have a specific a token key, right? Because I possess that, and if I have another form factors associated with that to identify me. The reason is that is even if my phone is stolen, the hackers don't have my fingerprint. Or whatever another factor that's identify me, so that it's just harder for hackers trying to use password or using this password spray to brute forcefully to trying to steal that and penetrate to the rest of your systems. And again, that goes back to we also support open standards. How many of you know FIDO 2.0? Yeah? Here you go. So we're working with the industry to develop a FIDO 2.0 standards. In that case, so the industry supports the protocol, allows for passwordless signing option. Still is a multi-factor authentication. Microsoft, any of you use Microsoft Authenticator app? A few? Okay. If you use Office 365, turn on MFA, then you can use the Authenticator app. How many of you use Windows Hello? Okay, more. How many of you use the Windows Hello facial recognition? See, right? I mean, actually, it's pretty cool. Even I was sitting here when Matthew was trying to set up, I was doing it's too close, it's not close enough. But I don't have to remember my password, and it is much better, right? We're also working with FIDO standards, so we can have hardware key or fingerprint reader and etc. And it's all coming, so it is getting real. And the good news is the apps did not necessarily have to change. They just have to integrate with Azure Active Directory through Active Directory. So all the stuff you're learning helps that journey for user to get to that. Okay, so let's see. I think I skipped this part of it. I want to talk about what's next. So one of the things that really we want to work on is called a decentralized identity. So how many of you heard that, DID? No? A little bit, right? Basically is username password is not secure, as well as a lot, especially in Europe, frankly in the US, and think globally, people care about privacy. We don't want to have an identity that somehow government is just going to track us, but it would be great to have an identity that all the services around the world can actually trust. So the key question is how can you have a system that everybody can trust, but not owned by one organization or one government? One of the techniques to use that is through anchor that system on a blockchain, right? Because blockchain is a decentralized system. So sometimes you may hear blockchain identity. So that is the blockchain. Think about that as an implementation. The technology can enables decentralized identity. So what would that roughly look like? First of all, the system has to support decentralization. Blockchain is one way of supporting that. Second, but the thing is that, so nobody owns the system, everybody can go to the system and trust it to verify the identity. Second is the information, so your own personal information associated with identity that anchored through blockchain is owned by you, and that is important. That means no organizations or companies or government will be able to have control over those information except you. But you can grant access to whatever entities wants to have access to those information. A good example would be, I think France is doing that, right? Which is all your medical records, right? How do I, if I go from one medical provider to another, how can I, making sure that medical record information is only belongs to me and I don't want anybody else to see? But as I go in through different agencies online, I mean, physically you can do, but this is about online. You can get send in those information securely, but also identify you uniquely without signing to each, whether hospital or doctors, so that, and also just sending them the information that in an unsecure way. So that's kind of where we're heading. Where we are on the blockchain side, we're starting to have a proof of concept. The industries are mostly interested in this. I would say a few. One is the governments, because the governments like to issue IDs, to enable scenarios like healthcare and a bunch of other cases. But nobody wants to have just a government-owned identity, so can track you, etc. So we're working with a few governments on that. Another set of companies are financial companies, right? Like all of you doing online transactions or pay your credit card bill. So how can we do in a system so you can have one set of identities that's totally trusted by banking systems across the world? These are the things we're working towards. Before I go to Q&A, I just want to kind of, a few advices. I mean, this is by no means the only thing. I touched a lot of it. The ones I didn't touch, I want to say is as you enter your career, going to your next internship or your next job. First of all, I can just tell you, you know more than you think you do. You actually know the domain space more because you are learning the latest and in terms of what's happening. So don't think, hey, I'm the new, student, just graduated, and then you have all these experts in the industry for a long time. We just, you might think we do, but sometimes we don't know more than you do. So don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Don't be afraid to ask why, because sometimes you might just ask to do something. But I really highly encourage you to ask why. Because if you don't know why would you do it, right? So ask the why. And sometimes if you have new idea, don't be afraid to say it, because you will be surprised sometimes. Sometimes you will be surprised, the ideas you bring can be really fresh thinking that can add value. The other thing is sometimes I get asked is, how do I get my first job? What are the things, a employee or interviewer look for? Nobody expects you to know everything. And frankly, if you know everything, frankly, that's not really a good interview, frankly, because it's not trying to, look, what you learn is the basics. But that is not what's, you're going to do that for the rest of your life to begin with, although it's also the technologies, everything keeps evolving. The key thing to take these classes, the learning, is the learning. The learning and how you be continuously to be curious, having the passion in the technology you're working on, as well as has just that growth, we call it growth mindset, is really just asking the why, knowing what's next, thinking about their different possibilities. And that really helps me to be successful, frankly, because look, none of these existed 20 years ago, right? I mean, well, Active Directory probably did, but none of in terms of the cybersecurity and the cloud and everything. So we have to continue to learn and grow in order to be stay with technology and stay on top of technology. But it's also fun. So think about fun. It's not just daunting or scary. And the last is, do find balance, do have fun, like don't just think, career is, it's not about the job is the only thing, or the project, or whatever things you think that facing you, that top of your mind. Do have fun, do have some passion project outside of work. A lot of people on my team had different things. Like on my leadership team, like I have a few, they really like gardening. Some really like to make woodwork. For me, it's like about outdoor stuff. So do having things more than just one dimension, keep you balanced. But the world is bigger than just one aspect. So with that, I think that's all I have for content. Hopefully, there's some sparking some questions. Thank you. Now you have to do your work. Who's curious? Asking questions.
With the progress of the cloud services and the single sign-on policy,
Yeah.
don't you think that the cloud is like a threat for the security? Because if I want to...
So, okay, nice. I was telling that, don't you think with the progress of cloud services and the single sign-on policy, the fact that we can sign on your phone instead of your desktop, and maybe that the phone is hosting, I don't know, a virus or something like that, is a threat for a company?
Yeah, absolutely. A phone can be. So the question is, with cloud services, if I sign to laptop or phone, the phone can be a threat because the phone can be compromised. Absolutely right. But the reality is, you can be compromised on your PC as well, because, you can forget to take the latest patch, for example. So that goes back to assume they will be compromised, right? So phone, for example, the project, we work on called a device management, which is we continuously detect if you have your virus running on your phone, if your phone is being jailbroken, in other words. And if we detect that, so the next time you're trying to access the information, then we will you can block the person from access information. Or if we know the phone is jailbroken, even the data you have on the phone, maybe not your personal data, but your, like the company data gets remotely wiped, right? Because we know your phone gets compromised. So to me, it is like, you're right, it is factors, but that's happening in your traditional environment anyway. So you might just apply that to all of the environment that assume that will be compromised. It's just about what steps do you take next.
Hi. I heard that one of your colleagues in New York, named Alex Salmons, is working on an Active Directory based on the blockchain technology.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what are the advantages using an Active Directory based on...
So Alex Simons report to me. He owns all of the product development in terms of defining what's the next and what the feature set. So what I just called like decentralized identity is blockchain based on Azure Active Directory, right? So again, the scenarios is like with banks, MasterCard or Citibank or etc. Is because all the companies are doing business online. So we know that creating just a username and a password, and then how do you then securely send all your financial information, as well as doing, like, I don't know, in the US, you like apply mortgage, right? You apply mortgage, you have to prove all your financial data. So these are the scenarios is how do you do it online securely? How do you make sure that all your information can be accessed securely? But you don't have to traverse that. In this case, well, you might establish a relationship with Citibank, but what about another organization, like the mortgage or the loans or the property, that owners, like how do you do that transaction across the different organizations in a secure way, and yet not create some kind of national ID? Does that make sense?
There is a question here.
You mean, so your question is, does that prevent attackers from? Yeah, I mean, so like in one of the design principles for decentralized identity is don't use username password, right? Well, use biometrics to identify you. For the same principle is because if you use username password, that just becomes easily compromised. That makes sense, yeah.
I have a question about legal issues concerning passwords, because if you go passwordless, Justice, for example, can force you to give your fingerprints to unlock your phone, whereas they can't force you to give your passwords, like your PIN number. So going passwordless could be dangerous for users' privacy instead of helping them.
So the fingerprint is not. You mean privacy from sending that to authenticate?
I mean, when you're arrested, for example,
yeah,
they can force you to give your fingerprint to like your phone or your computer to access your data. If you have a PIN or a password, they can't force you to give it. So if you have something to hide or you just don't want to have your privacy in danger, it could be a danger to go passwordless. And I want to know what you think about it.
I mean, it's a good question. You're just saying because if you get like arrested because if like in this particular case, it's not about the hackers. At least we're not like it was the passwords in my head. You can read my mind versus like fingerprint is something physical, right? That's true. I guess one thing is that then you can think about the future have maybe different factor authentication. Right, like a different like the physical characters, like your biometrics, is one way to uniquely identify you, but that's just one factor, right? So you have second factor. Today, the convenient way is like a phone, right? You can have a hardware token. Maybe we can, in the future, we'll think about something different. I don't know if any top of the mind.
You can shut down your phone real quick. It reboots, and then it's a PIN, so they can force you.
Part of it is also the assumption you're making that they can't force you to give the code, for example. In many countries, including the US, they can. You go through customs, they can ask you for the code, and unless you want a lot of trouble, you have to give it to them. Now, they don't generally do it, but they can. And so it changes all the time, though it does bring up the interesting question of it's not just, for authentication in general, it's not just proving that you are who you say you are, but also some proof of intent to allow that. Which is, it's a very interesting question that is certainly being looked at in general with biometrics.
But it's a good point, we may not get everything right. There might be the next frontier things, whether from privacy perspective, and that's why you're here. That's why I said asking that questions, But I think we all agree there might be cases you say, oh, maybe I worry more about that, but in general, in terms of protecting like against hackers, right? It is better, right? Doesn't mean there may be not downside of it, but then think about what are other ways to use. The goal is not biometrics. The goal is not password. The goal is how to uniquely identify the person. And I think your question is how to also preserve privacy is a good one.
Okay, I guess this is the last question.
Is that okay? I'm having fun.
He just doesn't want to keep walking.
He doesn't want to walk here. I'm having fun.
I was wondering, when you were talking about decentralized identity, wouldn't it be a problem if big companies like Microsoft start leading the charge in this domain? Like, for example, instead of having state-centered identities, you would have identities where to access it and use it, you would have to log on your Microsoft account or something like that, or for other big companies.
Yeah, in this case, we don't own the records. Like the blockchain owns, like you anchored on a blockchain. So Microsoft doesn't own any of the identities. We're just providing the technologies, enables it. So it enables, like for example, the Microsoft Authenticator app allows you to import a blockchain identity. but we're not the one who verify your identity. But we allow us to integrate with our system so that we can try to authenticate against that blockchain to say, okay, I can trust it. So I trust that blockchain system, but I'm not the one who owns it. Like my level of trust is equivalent of a Google trust or equivalent of a government trust. Think about in ways, the passport or your birth certificate, right? In the ways is it belongs to you. I mean, and especially birth certificate. But then you can get even you are issued by. In this case, it's not complete analogy because it's sort of government issued. But the idea is it's actually trusted by globally across even whether you are U.S. or other countries. Or even you are in some of the more adversary countries, there's still a form of identity that's trusted globally by all countries. So our design goal is how do you create an identity that everybody can trust it, but it's not one single organization actually created or verified. It's against a decentralized system to verify that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, great question.
Do you think that we can really go passportless in the future? Because I mean, a few days ago I set up the multi-factor on my Google account, and they gave me some codes to remember in case of I lost my phone.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't have it.
Great question. Actually, we talked about that the other day with some of the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officers of companies in Paris. Yes, so because today, even with the authenticated app that we announced, the way we try, because you might lose your phone, right? You don't also want to get to say, I'm so passwordless, once my phone lost, everything's like dead. That's no good. So, part of things you have to think about we call the edge cases. It's the what if cases. The cases things go wrong, and in this case, it's like, well, I lost my phone, so now what? I have my fingerprint, but I don't have my phone. So how do you do that recovery? And so they might ask you to store another code or another, which is basically password in some way. But you could imagine, actually, Philippe there, like yesterday, he told a great example. It's like you could imagine like if it becomes like a hardware token, if that becomes your another factor, and you store that away, or some other things that are coming online. So password is maybe the traditional way, but at the least, if you store that away, you don't use that on a daily basis, you can create a very long random number generated one, and you can still use a way to do a password reset to retrieve it, and you never use it. So it's better. But you can imagine once you have FIDO 2.0, that shows your phone and the biometric is just one way, and then you can maybe have a fingerprint reader is another way, or you can have a kind of YubiKey equivalent of that is another way, and God knows what other ways you can think of. It's more about the main design point is having an alternative multi-factor passwordless option as a way to help you to recover, right? Maybe you have a third way as another fallback. It's more like the fallback option. It doesn't have to be passwords. But the system is not quite there. But I'm sure by the time it depends on which you are freshman year or not. I mean, it's coming. I mean, it's not fiction at this point. So.
So in your presentation, you didn't talk too much about antivirus. Is it because we have seen its limits and it will become less and less relevant, or?
No. I mean, when a great question. I more anchored this talk around identity access management since kind of top of mind. When we think about threats, we absolutely think about identity access manager as one sort of think about one dimension. The second dimension is about threat protection. And in the threat protection category, it's about the endpoint. The endpoint is malware on devices. And then you have malware in the applications. And you have malware in the devices can be hardware, it can be operating system, it can be application. So the threat protection is end to end. So it's absolutely in that category. And then we think about really what you want is to protect your information, like the sensitive documents, the data you want to protect, right? And the last but not least is how do you have the system designed the way you can manage and doing security operations, like some of your classes that teach you. So you really think about it as the front door is identity access management, and then how you think about throughout this, like the entire end-to-end, from users to applications to operating system, even to hardware, all those threats, including malware, like what are those attack patterns and how to detect that and to mitigate, and to think about to protect the data, documents, and information, and then how do you have a security operating model to remediate and continuously monitoring. So, great question. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy. Last question. One more. Okay. Because actually, Joy has to leave.
I'll do one more question.
Yeah. One more question.
This is my last, it's actually fun.
Hello. I have a question. How do you motivate when the competition between the hacking technology and the defensive technology how to say, no end competition between two
You
sides?
said, how can I motivate the high-tech companies versus?
How do you motivate in the defensive side to face the evolution of the hacking technique?
How do I motivate the different? I have enough folks here to help if you speak in French. Can.
The question is, how do you motivate people in defense environments? Because, as she says, this is an endless battle between defender and attackers.
Well, I think that's why you're here, frankly. Oh, honestly, I am sure whatever I say, it's going to evolve even like in the next 3 months, 6 months. The technology is constantly changing. And I'm that's why I'm super excited to be here. To me it is awesome we have classes like this. And the second is it's all of us together to detect, what are having that curiosity, right? To me it's actually fun, right? It's like solving puzzles, trying to be detective. No mistake, there will be things we haven't learned. But the one thing I can tell you, and that's the same whether you are trying to say it's cyber security or whether it's your homework or your assignment, you'll make mistakes. I make plenty of mistakes. The thing is to take away is my rule of thumb is you can make mistakes, just don't repeat the same mistake. Just learn from the mistakes. And frankly, I can tell you, you learn way more when you learn mistakes. With things you just know the answer, even though it makes you feel good, you're not really learning. You're just knowing, right? So to me, how do you motivate is is attackers getting ahead or are we getting ahead? But the thing is just about, continuous learning and have that curiosity. And it's fun, right? And just don't make the same mistake. It's okay to make mistakes. As long as you're making new mistakes, you're learning. So I think that I will end on that. Just keep learning, keep challenging. So, thank you.
you, Joy, very much for coming. We are pleased to have you in our school. Thank you all. Merci à tous. Now actually we have a cocktail actually in the cafeteria that's waiting for us. You can still have actually Joy for some minutes to have more questions. So thank you again and good evening.